How does one establish trust as a real estate agent? We're going to talk about that today. Stay tuned. This episode of Keeping It Real is brought to you by Real Geeks. How many homes are you going to sell this year? Do you have the right tools? Is your website turning soft leads into interested buyers? Are you spending money on leads that aren't converting? Well, Real Geeks is your solution. Find out why agents across the country choose Real Geeks as their technology partner. Real Geeks was created by an agent for agents. They pride themselves on delivering a sales and marketing solution so that you can easily generate more business. Their agent websites are fast and built for lead conversion with a smooth search experience for your visitors. Real Geeks also includes an easy-to-use agent CRM. So once a lead signs up on your website, you can track their interest and have great follow-up conversations. Real Geeks is loaded with a ton of marketing tools to nurture your leads and increase brand awareness. Visit realgeeks.com/keepingitrealpod and find out why realtors come to Real Geeks to generate more business. Again, visit realgeeks.com/keepingitrealpod. And now, on to our show. Today's episode is brought to you by corded.io. Are you looking for agents to join your brokerage or team? Now, as a real estate recruiter, I can tell you the answer is always yes. But most agents aren't looking to move right now. So how do you know who to contact? Well, what if I were to tell you there's a recruiting and retention tool powered by artificial intelligence that shows you exactly which agents in your local market are looking to leave their brokerage right now and which agents at your own firm are also looking to leave you? Now, I've been recruiting realtors for 15 years and I've hired over 2,000 agents. I can tell you with no exaggeration, this is the tool I've been waiting for. Corded's AI looks for trends across dozens of variables for each agent in your market and shows you which agents they believe are likely to move. Not only does it do that, but Corded's AI went and visited my recruiting website and read everything I offer. So now when I'm recruiting, Corded's AI tells me exactly what to say based on that agent's needs and what my brokerage can offer. It even writes emails for me. I've never seen anything like it, and I use it every single day. Now, if you are looking to grow your brokerage, Corded.io is the best tool out there. Visit Corded.io to schedule a demo. Again, that's Corded.io. And now, onto the show. Hello and welcome to another episode of Keeping It Real, the largest podcast made by real estate agents and for real estate agents. My name is DJ Paris. I'm your guide and host through this show. And yes, this is my real voice. I just had a conversation with an agent who is a listener of mine, and she goes, I can't believe you actually sound like that. So I do. And in just a moment, you're going to be hearing this same voice interviewing the great Scott Spelker, a number one agent in New Jersey in his area, and it's a really great conversation. He gives so many amazing tips. I can't wait for you to hear it. I promise it's one of the better episodes we've done in our 7-year history. But before we get to Scott, just a quick reminder. First of all, if you're new to this podcast, thank you. We appreciate you being here. I am here to serve you, help you get to actually hear from these top producers that you might see in your area and maybe you don't have connection to, you don't have access to. I have access to them. And by the way, if there is somebody in your area that you don't have access to, that you're like, how does that person do that? Reach out to me. I will get them on the show. And if you're a returning fan or returning listener, boy, you're my favorite type of people because you keep coming back. We need to hear from you though. We want to know what you want more of on the show. Give us your guest requests. We get so many guest pitches, but maybe they're not who you want, right? Maybe you have somebody, like I said, in your local market that you want to know. Bring them to us. We will get them on the show. Thank you for sharing this with other agents in your office. We know tons of agents that listen to this as part of their sales meetings. That really means a lot to us. Let us know those stories. We appreciate you. All right, guys, let's get right to it. My conversation with Scott Spelker. Best advice you have received in real estate?
Best advice I've received in real estate, and I guess we're going to go with the worst advice too. You know, I'd say the best advice I probably got was that you really have to kind of brand yourself in some way. Kind of figure out. It takes a little time. Figure out, who you're going to be. Um, and I talked to different real estate agents to try to get a feel for, what was the thing that was going to kind of really going to resonate with me. And I guess the word was trust. It just kept coming back to that word trust and how important it is to have somebody you're working with that you trust. But along with that advice, they said, in addition to branding, and you want to really, for lack of a better word, put yourself out there. So, sometimes it's a little bit hard because it doesn't feel genuine when you're joining clubs, to basically to meet people and to kind of meet new people to be able to sell real estate. But I didn't really do that as much. But the point is the same: is you got to be out there. You can't be holed up in your house or in your basement, meeting nobody. As I tell my wife when I go golfing several times a week in the nice weather that I'm working on client relations, and she's like, "You're going golfing," and I was like, "Well, you can call it that," but I have to tell you, there's a lot of people that you play with over time, and you just kind of build a rapport. And for me, it's golf. You build a rapport that I have no doubt that when time comes to sell their house, I'm going to be probably the first name on the list, because there's just a relationship that's built up through something that I just enjoy doing, and that's playing golf. So that's part of it. Part of it is, if you're active, maybe, you're, I don't know, a Girl Scout mom, or maybe you're a baseball coach, or you're a cheerleader coach, or dance instructor, or you're a town council, whatever it is. People just need to see you out there. And I don't go up to them and basically, so they run the other way when they see me and want to talk to them about real estate all the time. You don't want to be that person, but
Sure.
they'll know who you are. They'll know that you do real estate. And I think it's important to advertise, especially in the beginning. You want to advertise, get your name out there. I mean, I used to do open houses, and I branded my open house signs. I caught a lot of flack for some of the other agents. They didn't think, you can't do that. And the manager was like, yeah, not only can you do it, I've encouraged you all to do it. And he's the only one that bought his own sign. So brand your signs. And then what I would do is I would have an open house on, some street. And most people put out like, a sign in the corner, or maybe one down the next corner. I would put a dozen signs out, sometimes stretching from Main Street in my town to the next town. It was along the same road, but I would have friends at the time were like, "Hey, I want to come by visit you at your open house. Where is this thing? I've been driving for 3 miles." I wanted people, like, anywhere they drove, to see my real estate sign, because I was trying to project like I was doing way more business maybe than I was when I first started.
Sure.
So buy a lot of signs when you do open houses and put them everywhere. Technically, you had to take them down by a certain time, but sometimes I would forget, and they would be there for the morning rush hour for people to see as well. But yeah, so I guess it's a long way of saying, get yourself out, put yourself out there,
Yeah,
interact with other people.
don't be a secret agent.
Yeah, don't be a secret agent. Interact with other people, and preferably in things that you enjoy. And more often than not, you're going to see that people are going to bring up real estate to you. I'm never the one that brings it up. I never bring it up on the golf course. I don't bring it up at parties, social situations. I don't not talk about it. They'll say, "How's the market? How's the market?"
Sure.
So yeah, I'll have a conversation with them about it, but I just don't want to be that guy that you run away from because all he wants to do is ask if you want to sell your house. But so that would be the best advice I got, I suppose. The worst advice, and it's not that bad, but as somebody that I was really trying to get going quickly. I'm not a patient person. I worked on Wall Street for 25 years as a trader. Everything was very quickly. Everything happened on a warp speed. So the advice was, listen, just be patient. It's going to take 5 to 6 years before you really start getting any traction in this business. And I think if I took that advice, I probably would have just kind of sat back and maybe taken the small amount of money that the company and the office gives you for marketing. A lot of people didn't even use the marketing. They gave us like $200 a month that you could use for mailers and stuff. And I was amazed at how many people did not even use the free money to send out mailers. So I decided, listen, 5 or 6 years is not going to do it for me. But that was the advice. 5 or 6 years, and learn from the ropes, and maybe you should join a team first, and learn this business that way. And I think for some people, maybe if you're not a self-starter, that's not a bad way to go. But I was like, yeah, no. The first year I made $50,000 and I spent $45,000. I would say probably 10 of it was, videos and photography and expenses and stuff. But the other 35,000 was on marketing.
Yeah.
And then the next year, just for round numbers, we'll say I did 100,000 and I spent 50.
Yeah.
So my wife says, you've been working for 2 years. You made 55 grand. She says like 27,500 a year. Seems like a lot of work for not a lot of money. I said, I'm like Amazon. I'm building a base here. It's all revenue right now, no profits.
Yeah.
But I threw a lot of money into the business, whether it's the brochure at our church in town, where people will recognize it because I've lived in this town for 50 years. But the diner, you go from church to take the kids to the diner, and there I am on a placemat. Then you go to hit golf balls at the driving range or play miniature golf that afternoon, and I'm there again. Just all over the place. And you go to the recreation field for your kids' football, soccer, or lacrosse game, whatever. There I am again. So it was just, people say, is it worth the money to advertise? Can you do a cost benefit ratio? And I'm like, I have no idea. For the longest time, I thought the church bulletin was probably kind of a complete waste of time. I advertised there because then when my mother would say to me, did you go to church this weekend? I would say, yeah, I go to church every weekend. And she goes, no, you don't. I didn't see you in church this weekend. I said, look, I go to every single mass. And she says, oh, you're lying now. And I said, I'm in the bulletin, and that's technically I'm in church. So I was going to stop advertising after a couple of years in the church bulletin. And then one time I got a phone call from a guy, like on a Monday afternoon. I'm driving through town, and I'm thinking, as real estate agents, anybody listening to this will know that we get calls. We have to answer our phone because you never know. It could be somebody wants to sell a house or buy a house. So more often than not, it's some nonsense call. And you're just like, for a while there, they were selling that. What was it? Car warranties or something. They would get me like 3 times a day with that. So anyway, I pick up the phone on a Monday afternoon, and it turns out it's this guy, and he says, listen, I'm thinking about selling my house. I was like, well, yeah, when would you like to get together? He goes, what are you doing right now? And I was like, I'll be there in 5 minutes. Put his house on the market 4 days later. And I said, why did you give me a call? Why did you pick us? He said, I heard a lot of good things about you from my kids' school, some of the parents. And then I was in church, and I'm kind of bored at the end, and I'm flipping through the church bulletin, and I see your face there, and it says something like 50-year parishioner or something. He goes, this is my guy. Yeah. So the church bulletin actually got me that listing, and then he referred me to somebody else. Between the two of them, it was about $4 million worth of real estate, which is, whatever, call it 2.5%, it's $100,000 before my split, but a pretty serious amount of money. So the next year, when the salesperson called me whether I wanted to stay with the church bulletin and pay them whatever $1,400, I'm like, there's no way I can cancel this. Not because I think I'm going to get additional business, but I was so blessed to get any sort of return on that after 5 years and putting out $7,000. I'm thinking that was a complete waste of money. So the point is, advertise, invest in yourself, get your name out there as much as you can. You're never going to know exactly which is the reason you got the listing. But at the end of the day, you've got to put that money back in. And I looked at it this way. Look, if I put $20,000, which is a ton of money compared to what most agents will spend. Around here, that's the equivalent of, if you get a listing that's I don't know, $1 million. Okay, it's not quite, but maybe it's 2 listings of $700,000. So it's a little bit of work. That work that you do in those 2 listings, and you're throwing it right back into the business. But you just have to do it if you want to have kind of a decent amount of business coming in. And the more business you have coming in makes you, how do I describe this? All right, when you go to a bar, we're gonna go off the rails here. So I got to go back. I'm 62, so it's been a while. Of course, it's been many, many years since I've been at a bar. But so you go to a bar, and you're a single guy, and We all know this. We've all been there. And it applies to women, I'm sure, too. But you go to a bar and you're hoping to meet somebody, right? Hoping to meet somebody. And they can smell the desperation on you. So nothing's happening, right? Meanwhile, if you had just started dating somebody, maybe a couple weeks before, you're kind of seeing each other, then when you go to the bar,
Yeah.
all of a sudden, it's like you can't miss. All these girls want to talk to you and everything. You're like, what's the difference? It's the same with real estate in the sense that when you have quite a bit of business going on, you don't reek of desperation. You're a little bit more relaxed, a little bit more calm, a little bit more self-assured, not desperate that you're going to make a mistake and worrying so much about what comes out of your mouth with the in a listing presentation. Oh my God, should I say, this word or should I say that word? And then you're just uptight. So it's maybe it's not a great analogy, but I think you understand where I'm coming from. It's if you have some business going on, it's going to allow you to be a little bit more flexible and a little bit more at ease. And that is actually going to lead to more business because nobody wants to be sold anything. When you go into a department store, you go into the store and you see the person coming over.
The worst.
It's the worst, right? All they're going to do is say, can I help you with anything? It's harmless. They're not all over you. But just them coming over, I'm like, oh God, can I hide behind the sweater section?
Yep.
Because I don't want to talk to anybody. That's the same thing I think you get a lot of times in real estate where they're like, even if I'm at an open house, you got to give them some space. Sometimes they're more likely to come up to you if you say, hey, listen, you have any questions with the house? The paperwork's over there. Happy to give you help you, blah, blah, blah. Let them see the house.
Yep.
Won't be, hey, where are you guys from? You guys have an agent? Nobody wants to be sold anything. Let them feel like it'd be a privilege. Like you're good enough that you don't need to do that.
Yeah.
So, that's a long way of saying that's some of the advice I got. You can cut that piece up as many which ways to Sunday.
We will not cut a moment. We will not be cutting a moment of that because everything you said was amazing. It's really exactly the advice that lots of other people that have come on our show have given in bits and pieces. You gave a lot of it right up front. This is the very first few minutes of the show, and I cannot thank you enough because you were very thoughtful and intentional in your answers, and our audience was taking notes. They are listening. They're going to go back and re-listen because there's so much given there. And we could really stop the interview right now and just call it a day, and that would make me very happy with the content. But we're gonna do more, of course. But in fact, I want to say before we introduce Scott, which we haven't even done yet, I want to say this is the reason why I do this show. And I've been doing this for 7 years, and this is not new for me. And people say, boy, it must be a grind. And yeah, I guess to some degree, everything that's worthwhile is a grind. But I get to meet people like Scott, and this is really exciting for me because I really like Scott, and we just met minutes before, but I really like him, and I'm really so blessed. You talked about being blessed. You talked about playing golf. And you're right. You're spending 4 hours with somebody, playing 18 holes and, or whatever you're playing, and you're developing a relationship with them. And, especially if you go to a golf course by yourself, they're going to pair you with somebody. So you're definitely going to meet somebody new. But I get to do that on this show. And I'm so grateful for it because I get to meet cool people like Scott who have been in this business a long time. Scott comes from Wall Street previously in his career. We'll talk about that in a moment. But I get to meet people like Scott, which is so fortunate for me because even though I'm not out there practicing as an agent, which would make more sense for me doing the show if I was, but our audience gets to benefit from that. But I also get to meet people like this who are inspiring to me. So let's bring him on. So Scott's already here, of course. Scott Spelker is who we're chatting with. He's from the Spelker team with Coldwell Banker in Madison, New Jersey, which is about 30 minutes or so west of Manhattan and in a really fun part of New Jersey. I've spent some time around that area back when I used to work for Anheuser-Busch and we were touring around. But let's talk more about Scott. Scott is married to his wife and business partner, Amy Spelker, for 37 years, met at Dickinson College. He majored in economics, went directly to Wall Street, where he became a foreign exchange trader, Forex, which is what you hear a lot about these days, of course, but certainly not an easy thing to do. After a 25-year career, Scott went into real estate and has been doing that for the last 11 years. He's active in his community. He's served on several boards of directors. He volunteers. He gives back. He's coached youth league baseball and football for a combined 35 years and has also coached the Madison High School varsity tennis team. I am a tennis player as well. I appreciate that. For 3 years. Scott and Amy have 3 sons and a granddaughter. They both love to travel domestically and internationally. Scott's other hobbies include playing golf, as he mentioned, and reading. I want everybody to follow Scott and his team at Spelker NJ Homes. He is in New Jersey, so Spelker NJ Homes on Instagram, and you can find him. He's easy to find. You go to his church; he's in the Bolton, so easy to find. Scott, welcome to the show. We're so grateful to have you.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, let's talk about. So I'm curious about the move from Wall Street to real estate. Very different, obviously. Different. Well, maybe not a different skill set. I'm not sure. We have the board of exchange here in the mercantile exchange here and the options exchange here in Chicago. So I know a little bit of that world. I've never quite understood, trading interest rates and things like that, which are always confusing to me. When I ask traders, do you want things to go up or down? They're like, we just want movement. We don't really care where it goes.
Yeah,
Which is like, okay, that's hard for me to wrap my mind around. But anyway, you did this for a long time in New York in a very fast-paced environment. You saw a lot of change in the technology at Wall Street, of course, over that time. But curious, what prompted the change from Wall Street to real estate?
Well, we got to throw in a little bit of failure in there first, because it's when you're listening to somebody talk about yourself or whatever, what your background is, you're kind of like, oh, enough already about this guy. And meanwhile, that guy is me. There's a lot of blood, sweat, and tears, and a lot of failure that we need to point out here. So I did go right to Wall Street, and everybody that came before me, I was working for a commercial bank, and usually within 6 months, you got a chance to start trading. It took me 2 years. I was getting breakfast for everybody, lunch, coffee. It was like pledging a fraternity for the first 2 years. And eventually I got my shot, and I had a fairly successful career. It was absolute mayhem in the 80s and 90s. And you're sitting in a trading room of either a bank or investment bank, and essentially everybody had their own currency, and that was based on kind of how good you were. And the bank is letting you make bets with their money to make more money. So if I thought the euro was going to go higher, I'd buy 5 million euros, 10 million euros, 50 million euros. And sometimes it would only go up a little bit and you'd make 10 grand, 20 grand. If it went up a lot of it, you might make 500 grand. So the more money you made for them, the more money you got paid at the end of the year. It's not like they paid you. It wasn't commission either. It wasn't sales. It was trading. It was basically making bets. And if you were good at it, you got paid well. And if you didn't, you got fired. And the reason I left after 25 years was kind of what you alluded to before. There wasn't as much action. Now, granted, 25 years later, I was 47, 48. You think you'd be a little bit burned out by then. But when there was a lot of movement and a lot of action, the day just flew. But what happened is once the euro came around, it used to be many more currencies, and the euro came around in 1999. But the volatility kind of went out of it after. There was a little bit of volatility in 08 during the financial crisis. But it was like watching paint dry. You traded a little bit till 11 o'clock in the morning when London went home, and then you basically sat around till 5 or 6 o'clock at night. And I got bored. I just really got bored. I just didn't want to do it anymore. So this is where the failure comes in. I went back to school at night to the College of St. Elizabeth, close by to where I live in Madison. And they had an alternate route teaching program. So my brother had done it years before when he was 32 or something. And I'm doing this at 48 at the time. And so I went back to school to become a teacher. I wanted to teach U.S. history, world history, economics, that sort of thing. I figured I could coach as well. And I went through the program and student taught at a local high school. By all accounts, I wasn't terrible. Kind of more scary going up against, but in front of second semester seniors that have already mailed it in. And I've got to talk to them about sociology or world history without boring them to tears. More frightening, I would say, than when I played quarterback in college and getting hit by an outside linebacker, and more frightening than trading on Wall Street was going up against these kids. At the time, though, when I graduated, there were probably, I don't know, maybe 50 people in our class, and like only 4 of them were able to get full-time jobs. So every time we applied for positions, there were like 300 applications. So I wasn't able to get hired. I did some long-term subbing, but after 3 years, I couldn't land a teaching job. So I left the previous career, go to become a teacher, and I failed miserably at securing a job. Pretty low point in my life, to be honest with you. Nothing ever came easy to me. I mean, everything I did, I had to work pretty hard for it. And this, I did work hard for it, but nobody would give me a chance.
Yeah.
So that was a bit disappointing. And it was a little bit, I was definitely down for a while, not just financially, but I was also like really bummed out. Had no purpose. And I was too young to be 48, 49 years old to be retired. So everybody said, oh, you should go into real estate. And I struggled with that because I don't know, I just felt like it wasn't for me. But I ended up taking the test, passed it. And I said, if I don't like it, I'll just quit. I mean, I walked away from a Wall Street career. I can walk away from real estate. And I really didn't want anything to be that competitive. My previous career on Wall Street was so competitive. And that's why the thought of teaching appealed to me, to coach people in education, make them excited about learning, about history even. And that really appealed to me. And there's no competition. As I go to my competition with the social studies teacher across the hall, I mean, I can do my own thing and not have to compete. I don't want to compete anymore. So I ended up going into real estate and thinking, this is not competitive. It's not competitive. You just do your own thing. And it's just going to be like being a teacher. Within, I'd say 6 months, I came home one day and my wife said, something different about you. And I said, I'm back. She goes, what do you mean you're back? I said, I'm back. And she just looked in my eyes. She knew exactly what I meant. Back to being that kind of very, very competitive Wall Street person, not the person that's been off for the last 2 or 3 years, kind of in, professorial mode, going to be a teacher. And so I became very competitive about it and went all in. I don't do anything kind of part ways. I'm either all in or I'm not. So yeah, on the road to, I guess I'm a fairly successful real estate person. If I was 40, I'd probably have a team of 20 people, but at 62, that doesn't appeal to me. So yeah, I guess on a lot of benchmarks, we're pretty successful. I'm not all that, believe me, I'm not all that. But it's just important, I think, that people realize that, yes, you can have a second career, but my second career actually came after the one I failed at, trying to become a teacher, which really was what I wanted to do with that next stage of my life, and it just didn't work out for me. But real estate has, in some respects, saved my life because, I don't know how well I would have done mentally and emotionally if I continued to have zero purpose in my life and nothing to do. So I'm grateful for it.
I want to ask about your brand because we talked about branding, and I know trust is a big one for you. We were speaking about that before we started, and trust is a great one. I think if that's anybody's brand, I think that's a pretty good choice for a brand. Not that it has to be just one thing, but can you talk about what trust means to you and how you go about thinking about how to demonstrate that, right? Because of course everybody wants to be trusted, but there's steps to take and there's ways to do it. And there's ways to, of course, erode trust or remove it entirely. But how do you think about trust and how do you really establish that with your clients?
That's a great question. Because you can pay lip service to it. And you can put that on your marketing or in your listing presentation. But if you don't really explain why it's important to you, it probably isn't going to mean much to the person you're talking to. So trust to me, I think, has a couple different things, and I'm not going to beat it to death, but part of it is you're going to trust that the people you're working with are experts in their field, meaning us, and that we're competent, that we get it. When you come across somebody where you're interfacing with them, it could be through work or a sales thing, or you're trying to buy something online or on the phone, wherever, and you're talking with the other person, and they just get it. It's quick, it's seamless. So I think that's important. You can trust that you have people that you're dealing with that just get it. They get the fact that when you shoot them a text, they want to hear it back like now. They don't want to hear it back in 4 hours. You can call me at 10 o'clock at night. If I'm awake, I'm answering that phone. And you can trust that I'm going to go that extra mile, whether that means you're calling me from Florida and there's weather we just had recently even, and you say, listen, could you check on our house tomorrow to make sure there's no water in the basement? We're out of town. I'm like, no, I'm not checking on it tomorrow. I'm checking on it right now. And they're like, no, it's 10 o'clock at night. I'm like, listen, I still am clothed. I'm going to your house right now. Take a video and send it to you. So you can trust us to go the extra mile. You can trust us to be competent. But the other thing about the trust, and I do point this out, I usually put up a slide in our listing presentation and I must have seen this something like on social media. It's like the least trusted professions in the United States. And I was like, oh, here we go. I wasn't looking towards the top when I was looking for the real estate agent. I went down towards the bottom and worked my way up from the bottom, figuring that's where it's going to be. And I joke with people sometimes, like, I thought we would be neck and neck with the used car salesman, but it turns out we're a little bit higher. And listen, there's lawyers, which are, very highly educated people that are actually, I think, lower than real estate agents. So to me, that trust aspect, and we make a little bit of joke out of it. And I will say that the people that I work with generally, not just in this office, but in this area, are very professional. They really are. But that, the reputation still stands. If you ask a lot of people what they think of real estate agents, they think they don't do anything for the money, and their reputation, there's some reputational risk. And that was one of the things that kept me from maybe going into this field, because I didn't like that aspect. And then once I did go in, I said, let me at least try to have people come out of the other side of transactions saying this guy was very professional. This is not what I expected from a real estate agent. And that thing. So as far as the trust aspects, I will point out to some of the sellers after the listing presentation and say, look, we talk about trust. There's a lot of games that a real estate agent can play that you would never know. I mean, a ton of different things, and I throw an example out where, okay, I have a listing for a house. We're going to keep the numbers around here. So $1 million. And most of these people have gone on Zillow at some point. They say, my Zestimate is, 989. So an agent can say, well, listen, even though I think that house is, maybe 1.1, but yeah, that Zestimate looks good. Let's list it at, 989. And by the way, I've got a buyer for your home. I'm working with several buyers, and I bring that buyer in to see your house. And I tell the buyer, I said, listen, it's not even going to hit the market, but you really should you should offer over asking. So instead of 989, come in at $1,030,000. And I say to the seller, listen, my buyer really loves this house, and they're going to come in at $1,030,000, and I'm going to cut the commission by 1 percentage point. And so you're going to benefit by that. And if it's 1 point on $1,030,000, it's basically, what is that? 10,000? No, that's 1,000. No, it is
1,300. 13.
It's like $1,300. Yeah, that's why I'm not on Wall Street anymore. I can't have. So it's saving them $1,300, and they're getting 30, 50 grand over asking.
Yeah.
And they'll be telling people at cocktail parties that, oh, this agent was so good. They got me, 50 grand over asking. They got me saving the commission. Unbelievable. And I'm like, that's like the worst thing you can do. The biggest thing is to try to get the biggest amount of exposure for your house. So maybe I did bring a buyer in, but I'm exposing this house to everybody. And let's say there's 4 offers and it goes highest and best. And it comes in at the top offer, comes in at 1.2. So you would have left like $170,000 on the table.
Yeah.
And that's the thing. So there's so many different examples that I can give people. I usually give 1 or 2, and they're like, oh, I never thought about that. I said, yeah, I mean, there's different things that agents can do that there's nothing illegal about it. And they're bringing you a buyer for your home. They're bringing you a number that's more than you thought you were going to get based on whatever the Zillow estimate was. They cut the commission. There's nothing illegal about it, but I just feel like you're better off putting it on the market and trying to get as many people to bid on it and get you the biggest number. So, that's kind of another way that trust comes in. It's not just competence. It's not just the fact that, these people are going to be communicative, go the extra distance. You can trust that we'll do that, but you also can trust that we're not going to play games. We're going to try to get you the most money for your house, period, end of story. If there's a reason why I think you shouldn't take an offer that's maybe higher than another one, I'm going to be really clear about it. But ultimately, it's not for me to make that decision. It's for me to put everything out there, some different variables, and say, listen, this could happen or that could happen. You got to live with your decision. What would I do? This is what I would do, but that doesn't mean it's right for you. So again, you're trusting that somebody is sharp. They have judgment, street smarts, that they have your back. And that's what we try to get across. And we do. I mean, you can't do it in a mailer, but what you can do is when you meet with them at a listing presentation and you spend a good bit of time on that, and that the message comes across that you're very, you're upfront, you're honest about what you believe in. And if it's not a good fit, don't use me.
I know you have a very specific opinion about mailers, because we're talking about this, and trust, I think, is factors into this question as well, or this topic, which is mailers that homeowners get that say, "I have a buyer ready for you."
Yeah.
Tell us what your sort of thoughts about that.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think when I first started seeing that, somebody must have come up in one of these workshops and that, 1,000 agents go to, and they're like, send it out that you have a buyer for their home. And I think probably initially it was a bunch of garbage. But as time goes on, sometimes you'll see it's very specific. They'll say, Mary and Joe looking for, Center Hall Colonial, and this is their price point. Blah, blah, blah. Totally legit. I mean, it could be absolutely legit that they
Sure.
have buyers in that price point. But my point is like, well, great. When you put my house on the market, assuming I choose to use you as my listing agent, and it's also a way to get your foot in the door. If you say, I have a buyer for your home, and they contact you, do you really have a buyer for my home? Yes, maybe we should take a look at your home and we can give you an idea of what your house is worth. It's basically a way to get your foot in the door.
Sure.
But again, it goes back to the other story. It was like, I have a buyer for your home. And what you should be saying is, I have a buyer for your home, but you shouldn't take their offer until you put it on the market and let everybody else figure. That's what it should say.
Yeah, you know what? You're right. It should
yeah.
say that. You're right, and that should be the pitch. Yeah.
Yeah. So I try to get that message out to people. It is effective. I lost out on a listing to somebody, and I asked them. I said, why didn't you give us a call? And they said, well, they called me up on the phone and they said they had a buyer for our house. I was like, oh my God, do I need to go down into the lower echelons here and start calling people and telling them I have a buyer? I won't do it. I mean, if I was 40, maybe I would, but I don't know. It just doesn't appeal to me. It doesn't seem, it's not the seller's best interest. It doesn't feel to me genuine. It feels to me like it's a bait and switch.
Yeah. I tell you, I just had I would say a more comfortable version of that strategy, which I think would sort of fit in an authentic way, from a very, very successful agent out in Beverly Hills. And I was asking him how he got clients. And he initially had started as a production assistant in the entertainment industry. And I assumed he was going to say, oh, well, I built all these contacts and then I moved into real estate when I realized I wasn't going to get my shot to be a director. And I just kind of, had all these wealthy people that were in that business, and they started working with me. He goes, no, because I didn't have that network, because I was really trying to be in that industry and I wasn't there to make contacts for real estate. And then eventually I said, I got to get into real estate. And he said, so what I did, and he did this, and I thought this was really smart. And I'm curious to get your thoughts, because I think it ties into what you're saying, but I think in a way that does work, which is, he said, he goes, I love homes so much that I would walk around to these luxury homes that I could see pictures of them. I knew what they looked like on the inside. I fell in love with these homes. These are not homes that are on the market. These are just homes that he learned about. And he would knock on these people's doors and he would say, I am so sorry to bother you. I'm not here to sell you anything. He said, I love this house and I'm a real estate agent. And if you could just show me a little bit of the inside, like, I just want to confirm that what I think is in there is in there. And I'm not here to try to get you to list with me. You're probably not going to move anyway, but I just want to see if it matches what I think it is. And so he'd do that. He was very, very, very authentically doing this. And he said, everyone's flattered when you do that. So they'd show him around and he'd go, oh my God, this is amazing. He goes, look, whenever you are thinking about selling, I don't care when it is. He goes, I want to get a crack at bringing you a buyer. You don't have to list with me. I don't care. But he goes like, I will find you a buyer for this place. And he's like, I just want an opportunity because I love this house. And he did it very authentically. And that's how he got business. He knocked on doors and he did it that way. I never heard of anyone doing quite like that. And he's a nice guy and he's a genuine guy and he's an honest guy. And I thought, boy, that's a great strategy. That works. And he said, I just give him my card and, maybe 2-3 years later, maybe they call me, maybe they don't. He goes, but, I would go to them and say, I got to see this house. This is amazing. And I thought that's a really cool way to get in someone's favor and also, possibly get a listing down the road. And he would get listings that way, but he would say, my clients want places like this. I don't necessarily have one right this second, but you're not selling, so it doesn't matter, but I will find you somebody, and I thought that was a really cool idea. I just thought I'd bring that up, because it's fun to trust.
I don't have an issue with that. Listen, everybody has their way of
Sure.
doing this. Doesn't mean I'm right, somebody else is wrong. I actually have zero problem with that if it's genuine.
Sure.
You can't do that and then thank her and go right to the next door and knock on their door too.
Right.
Then it looks
Oh,
like,
no. Yeah. It
yeah.
has to be very, right.
And I
Yeah.
think
You
I
can't
could
go door
do
to
it.
door.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think I could do it. I mean, like even in town of Madison, there's probably, I don't know, 10 or 20 houses that I've always thought were really beautiful houses. And some of them I've never been inside. So I could genuinely go up and knock on somebody's door and say, listen,
Sure.
I've always loved this house. I've lived here for 50 years. It was always, I always figured if I hit it big on Wall Street, this would be the house I'd love to own. I could absolutely have that conversation with the seller because I truly believed it.
Yeah.
And I wouldn't,
Exactly.
it was only going to be a certain number of homes.
Yeah, that was his exact same philosophy too, is because he works
Yeah.
in the ultra high luxury sort of space where there aren't a ton of these homes, but he would just make a connection and he would stay in touch. And anyway, I want to chat because you have this really impressive finance background, and I want to talk about the Fed because I know as realtors, we look to the Fed. Oftentimes we look at where what the Fed's doing with interest rates, and then we assume that there's this direct correlation between what's going to happen with the lending market. And of course, sometimes there is and sometimes there isn't. But tell me how you think about, when you hear, the Fed's going to cut rates or they're going to raise rates. And does that mean anything to you? Does that sort of influence the way you can conversate with clients, or is it not that important for you?
It's important to me because it's important to potential clients. If it wasn't for that, it wouldn't be very important to me at all. Because first of all, when they talk about the Fed cutting interest rates, even if they cut it at 25 basis points, that means 0.25%. If the 30-year mortgage dropped the same amount, 25 basis points, the difference in a 30-year mortgage from a slight decrease in the mortgage rates is probably the equivalent of a Starbucks coffee per day. So it's not exactly moving the needle here. If you're going to get a 6% mortgage instead of 6.25%, oh, well, now things are going to start flying off the shelf. No, it's negligible. So that's one thing about interest rates, is that just because the Fed's going to reduce interest rates is not a lock. First of all, that you're going to see a significant savings in your thing. That's number one. Number two, there is a fallacy that if the Fed cuts interest rates, then mortgage rates automatically decline. And that is not true. And the reason for that, in a nutshell, is the mortgage rates are tied to the 10-year Treasury bond, which is independent. It has nothing to do with the Fed.
Right.
The yield on the 10-year Treasury bond is really influenced by a whole host of factors, from inflation indicators to sovereign wealth funds that are buying institutional, mutual funds, mom and pops that are buying T-bills and Treasury bonds and stuff like that. That is really based on a lot of different factors. And so the Fed could cut interest rates, and actually that 10-year yield could go up. Oh, wait a minute. You said the Fed cut rates. Shouldn't the yield on the bonds go down? Well, the Fed funds rates will go down because that's what the Fed cut, but the 10-year could actually go up. If the market perceives by the Fed cutting interest rates that that's going to juice the economy, which can be inflationary, the 10-year and the 30-year bonds are going to be more sensitive to inflation and inflation expectations than they are to what the Fed is doing. So that's just something and it's happened in the not too distant past, where the Fed has cut interest rates and the yield on the 10-year actually went higher. So this whole kind of, wait for the Fed to cut because then we're going to get rates at 4% again. I've been following interest rates and paying attention to interest rates for 40 years now.
Yeah.
And I mean, for a really, really long time, we lived in nothing but a really low interest rate environment. I mean, it's almost like you're almost forgetting about that. It's only been a couple of years, but it already seems like it's a distant memory. It's probably been, 4 years, but we were at really low interest rates. You had European central banks that had negative interest rates. You had to basically pay them to hold your money. So when I saw something, I don't know if it's the Wall Street Journal or Grant's Interest Rate Observer or something like that. He's an expert on interest rates. And he said, interest rates are at 5,000-year lows. That resonated. Yeah, that resonated with me. I'm like, we're going back to the pyramids in Egypt. You know what I mean? It's like Tutankhamun got a 30-year fix at 2.5. So I was like, This is unbelievable. 5,000 years. This guy, this is all he does. He's like a savant. He just studies interest rates. That's his thing. So I said to my wife, I think it might be time to refinance, or pull some money out and take out, increase the amount of mortgage, pull some money out, which I'm pretty sure that I could invest at a higher rate. And that's the whole thing about whether you pay your mortgage off. So if you're going to 2.75 mortgage rate, that's your cost of capital. You're going to get a tax write-off on that, by the way.
Sure.
It is interest in the business. So it's probably, I don't know, let's call it 20% off sale. So it's probably like a 2.35 is your effective interest rate. Now, at the time, treasury bills were yielding like next to nothing.
Right.
So it was hard to beat the 2.35 without taking some risk by putting it in the stock market.
Right.
But now you got short-term interest rates at 4%. They were probably at 4.5 to 10 years, somewhere around 4.2. So you don't have to do anything. You could take that money that you borrowed and put it over here in a pretty safe investment and have a positive carry. You're earning more. And that's the whole reason when you say whether you're paying mortgage off early or not, it's like, could you do better with the money?
Right. Sure.
If I got a 3% mortgage and I think I can do better than 3%, why would I pay my mortgage off sooner?
Well, yeah, if you can put that money in a bond environment, which of course a lot more stable, then yeah, it's kind of a no-brainer. And
depends on the excuse me, just so people don't think that bonds are ultra safe necessarily. Depending on the duration of the bond, if you have a 30-year bond, and as you saw in I think it was 2022, interest rates backed up pretty big time. So people that are thinking they've done nothing but positive returns on the bond market, because interest rates have done nothing but drop since 1982.
Right.
Then all of a sudden, for one of the first times, early 90s, interest rates backed up, but we had a pretty severe backup in interest rates in 2022, and people actually lost money in bond funds. So it can happen if you keep a shorter duration, 3 months, 6 months, 1 and 2 year treasury bills and notes. You're pretty much not going to lose a whole lot of money. You go to 30-year, further out on the curve to 30 years, there's way more risk because nobody knows where interest rates are going to be in 30 years, let alone 5 years. So they got to be paid for that. I need more money. I need a higher interest rate for me to take the risk of lending you money for 30 years. And that's the reason why the further you go out, the higher the interest rate is.
Yeah. But it's a really interesting idea, though, of taking equity out, putting it in the market in whatever matches your risk tolerance, and seeing what happens. And certainly,
I hope your viewership is not sound asleep with the discussion of interest rates and historical interest rates. They're probably half your audience with that segment.
No, I think it's important to talk about, because we are at a rate that where we are today, which is still historically pretty low, but in relation to 2021, 2022, it seems much higher. And you have just a lot of people who are sitting on the sidelines. And as a result, that's conversations that agents have to have is let's talk about, where rates are, date the rate, marry the home, having conversations about that. And also talking to homeowners who are at 2.75 and going, I don't want to really do anything right now. And having to sort of explain, well, here's what happens if rates do go down and all this competition floods the market. And if you are looking to make a decision or make a switch, then, there's some consequence to that as well. So yeah, I think it's important. I also wanted to ask you really specifically about setting yourself apart from other agents, right? From others. And I know this is something that we've talked about this throughout this conversation, so it's not something that we haven't touched on, but really figuring out, I know you've talked about sort of what makes you tick, what makes you different. Can you speak to that a little bit? Like figuring out what drives you. Tell us what drives you. You may have already said this, but curious to get your thoughts.
Let me backtrack 1 second. I'm just curious if there's ever been a study done on how many marriages are still together because they have a 2.75 mortgage rate.
Probably more than a few.
Yeah, they're like, man, I can't stand my spouse anymore.
I can't afford to leave.
I can't, I'm out of here. We're going to have to sell the house. I'm going to lose this mortgage. I'm going to tough this out. If they had a variable that was up to 5.5%, somebody's DOA, they're kicking that spouse out. But yeah, so I wonder if that, I tell people all the time, I'm like, don't move. And like, that's not good for your business, is it? I'm like, yeah, not really. I said, but it's genuine. All right. So what are we talking about? Oh, what drives me? Well, I didn't know what drove me for the first, I got to say, couple of years. And I'm not saying that that's an exercise that all agents need to do, figure out what drives them. I think, you get to a certain, maybe it's just who I am, or you get to a certain age, you just get a little bit more contemplative and you're thinking about things maybe more instead of just getting on with your life. But I needed that. For me to be motivated, I needed to figure it out what it is that I wanted. Like, I know the first career on Wall Street, it was all about making money. I was 22 years old. I came right out of school and wasn't the smartest kid in my class and didn't have the best grades, but I was very financially motivated from a young age, and not financially motivated to be rich so I could drive a Lamborghini. It was really just like, it was the game of it, like just to just accumulate money for no apparent reason. Then as I started realizing, I was like, I just want to make money so that I have freedom. It was about freedom, having the ability to not panic if I lost my job, or have the freedom to maybe at some point not work to 70. So that was, that kind of was what drove me in that first career. It was financially motivated. That's why I was confused with this one, because the teaching thing would have been easy. I know what drove me on that was to make kids love history or make them think school doesn't suck, and be one of those teachers that could be special. Real estate, I had no idea, because I was basically, what they say, fake it till you make it. I didn't know what I was doing there. I didn't know why I was doing. I just needed something to keep me busy, have purpose. So I was searching after a year or two to just try to figure out, because I knew it was important for me to figure out what drives me. Because if I don't know how long I'm going to stick at this, because I need that as a motivator. And it finally occurred to me, what really drove me was providing value. I don't know if it's just I'm a cheap SOB by nature. Maybe that's what it is. But I just feel like I'm like one of these people where whatever somebody says, this is what it costs, I'm like, that seems like a lot of money. Like, how long does that take until you actually do the job and you're like, oh, this is a nightmare. So I was like, I'm sure that everybody says like, oh, real estate agents make way too much. So it was almost like a mission for me to prove that, first of all, I tell them, listen, the listing is, whatever the percentage is, I don't get to keep all of it. I said, I got a company that's got to get paid. And I said, then I have to pay taxes on it. I have no health care. I'm an independent contractor. So I don't want you to think I'm getting, I'm buying a yacht next week on the back of this commission. So part of it was, I wanted them to feel like that I was providing value. So I was like, how do I do that? And you can't predict it all the time, how you're going to provide value. Sometimes it's going to be in negotiations with a potential buyer or running a multiple offer situation. Sometimes you can provide value that way, but I provided value in ways that I never knew it was going to even happen. I had one house that was sold, I think back in 2018 or 19, and it was about a $2.5 million house. And it was a summertime, and around this part of New Jersey, a lot of people go down the shore. I don't have a shore house, and I was probably the only schmuck in August that was sweating and walking around the streets of Madison, New Jersey, with no summer house and no good vacation spot to go to. So the seller texts me, I think, from the beach and says, listen, we've got these giant trees that are on the edge of our property. I mean, they're like 75, 80 feet high, oak trees that are gigantic, and they're dead. And I think it's on the town's property, because the town had a section of land that was right next to their house. I said, let me call somebody from the town. And I meet the guy over there, and he goes, no, this is on the homeowner's property. So, all right. I call a tree guy to come in. I said, hey, Chris, how much is this going to cost? He goes, these are big trees. And he goes, they are dead, and they could fall on a car or kill somebody. They really do need to come down. I said, how much is it? He goes, like $7,000. It's a lot of money. They're big trees. So I said to the seller, hey, listen, do you guys have a survey of your property? The house is only like 6 years old. Yeah, we have a survey, blah, blah, blah. So I go into the house. She tells me where the survey is. I take a tape measure and I walk off on a tape measure from the side edge of the house to the property line. And I realized that the trees are like 6 or 7 feet on the town's property. So I screenshot it, sent it to her. She emails it to the town, and the town said, no problem, we'll take it down. So I saved them like $7,000. And then I also fought their taxes for them, which they should call it the Spelker rule, because they don't allow you to do it anymore. I called them up and I said, listen, this house is listed now below the assessed value. and the assessed value is 90% of what you think it'll sell for. And they were like, all right, we'll cut the taxes down. So I think it was $8,000. So they didn't get the full benefit of the tax reduction. Whoever bought it, it was going to be a more attractive property because the taxes were $8,000 less. So yeah, that's one thing. One other quick story. There was a lot of times at home inspections, they do a home inspection. And sometimes some home inspectors feel like they got to justify their expense
Yeah.
by finding as many things as wrong as possible. So it's almost like you're a defense attorney, where the other side says, this is what's wrong with the house, and then you have to go out and get your expert witnesses that come back and say, your guy's full of what. So this was a condo, and there was a fireplace. It's $10,000. They put a camera up the fireplace. The guy says, it's about $10,000 worth of repairs. I'm like, that's a lot of money. So I bring in our chimney guy, and he's renowned in our area for being honest and good. And he goes, there's some problems with this chimney. I said, all right, well, lay it on me. What's it going to cost? He said, it's going to cost $1,200. I said, put it in writing. Immediately got it in writing, sent it over to the other agent. She recognized who was giving this estimate, realized that he's very professional, very good. She immediately told her buyer, we gave a credit of $1,200. Now, if I don't get involved in that,
right,
and just let the attorneys deal with it, maybe the seller just goes, oh, I guess my chimney's messed up. Let's give him 10 grand off the price.
Right.
Or the attorney says, listen, we'll split the difference. And that would have been 5 grand.
Yeah.
Instead of 1,200. So again, that drives me, is to find a way. I never can tell. I don't know if somebody's got dead trees on the property, that's on the property line, or somebody's got a chimney that they're going to get ripped off on. I never know what's going to happen in the deal that I'm going to be able to provide value, but I'm always looking for it. And if I can have somebody come out of the other end, I love to try to be able to pay for my own commission. And I point that out to them. I'm like, listen, the commission was 12 grand. I saved you $9,000. Can we agree that I only cost you 3 and that was a good deal? And they laugh because, most people just don't think like I do, but
sure.
I'm just trying to always provide value to them.
I love that. Well, Scott Spelker was our guest today. And for anyone listening who has clients, agents in other parts of the country who have clients that move into New Jersey, reach out to Scott. He may or may not be able to help them based on where they're moving to, but he certainly would love to touch base with you, make that connection. Scott, thank you on behalf of the audience. Amazing interview today. We had so much value you provided, so many great tips. We really appreciate you on behalf of the audience. On behalf of Scott and myself, thank you to the audience. Thank you for showing up. Thank you for listening, sticking around to the end of the episode. Best way that you can help us continue to grow is by telling a friend. Think of another agent who needs to hear this interview, and I would say just about any agent needs to hear this interview. So pass it over to anyone in your office. We would appreciate that. Get them connected with our show. It means a lot to us. Also, check out our sponsors. They help keep the show going, so we appreciate them as well. And Scott, thank you. We will see everybody on the next episode. Thank you, Scott.
You're welcome.